Hey, how's it going, everybody? How's everybody doing tonight? How's the audio levels so far? Let's take a peek at the chat. We're gonna get started in just a moment. Sean, Jake, Boeing fan, Reggie's, 44 Wheelies, what's up, guys? Denver Trainz, Derby City Rail, Double Spike Productions, LTG, what's up? JT Basson, Creeper, Terry Bolden, what's up, dudes? Ronnie GT. Yes, I was in the VRF Railfan chat earlier today watching the George Bush train. That was very cool. I always got to check on the audio levels just because I've got this new audio set up and I just still trying to figure out how to work it. So we're going to get started in just a moment. Just going to wait and see, let the chat build up, let the viewers build up. So wait until I hit the 4-minute mark on my thing here, maybe another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll get going. There's no video last Friday because I was on vacation the week before for Thanksgiving, so I didn't have a chance to get one recorded. So I do have one coming out tomorrow, though. All right, so let me give my intro into what we're going to be doing here today. So today's live stream is going to be different than anything else that I've done previously. This is going to be more of a tutorial live stream. If you couldn't tell by the title, we're going to be talking about reskinning and the basics of reskinning. And this is going to be kind of a high-level overview of reskinning. And I expect it to take maybe an hour at the most. Once I get done with the tutorial part, we'll do a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I'll try to answer questions throughout the process, throughout the tutorial, but there's a chance that I might miss something. So at the very end, we'll do a brief Q&A in case you guys have any other questions that I missed. So I'm going to mention that this tutorial, this specific type of tutorial, is part of a Patreon benefit. So this is the little commercial spiel that I have to give here. So this is part of a monthly Patreon benefit. If you're part of the higher level Patreon tiers, you'll get a monthly live stream where I'll do more advanced tutorials and this sort of thing. This is the very first one I'm doing, so I wanted to open it up to the public as a way to just let you guys know what kind of stuff you could expect if you do become, if you do want to join my Patreon and support the channel and that sort of thing. So this is a benefit that I'm trying to give to people who join at the higher tiers, higher level tutorials and more advanced techniques and stuff like that for the game. And I thought that this would be a good one to start with because a lot of people have been asking me to do a reskinning tutorial, and I would like to do a video version, but it's complicated. But anyway, so we're going to be covering it in a live stream tonight. Let me look at my notes here. So I will be covering how to reskin in, let me switch over actually, using Photoshop. So I'm not going to do the face cam thing tonight because we need as much screen real estate as possible. I'm going to be showing you guys how to do this in Photoshop. And I know a lot of people don't have access to Photoshop, but this is what I have. I'm not familiar with Paint.net or what's the other one? GIMP. I've never used them, but I know that these techniques can be used and applied in those programs as well. So I'm going to cover it in Photoshop. I think the most important thing is just to understand the fundamentals of how to actually clone your asset and open it for editing, and how to kind of get started with the reskin. So I don't view myself as an expert. There's a lot, I really am new to reskinning just within the last year have I got into it. So I don't consider myself an expert. Maybe I'm intermediate, but I feel like I have the ability to kind of break things down for you guys in digestible bits and pieces. So hopefully I can break down what I understand into something that you guys can understand, and you know, you guys can learn something tonight. So I just needed a little sip of water here. It's getting hot already in this office. So as I said, this is going to be kind of a high-level tutorial. I'm not going to cover a lot of in-depth type things in terms of Photoshop. I'm going to assume that you understand some of the basics of Photoshop, or at least some kind of photo editing software. Chris Bush, Wit Simulations, thank you so much for the donation. Guys, show Wit some love in the chat there. Thank you so much, man. So I'm going to assume that you have a little bit of a background with Photoshop or Paint.net or one of those sorts of things. Is the stream frozen? Is the video part of it frozen? Let me move some stuff around here. This is what I was afraid of, some video issues. And I'm also going to assume that you know how to do certain things in Trainz, but I'm gonna try to show you. I'm going to try to give you the basics so you can kind of get started on stuff tonight. So I think, let me check my notes. Okay, I think that's all I gotta cover for my intro here. It looks like if the video freezes up or something like that, guys, let me know in the chat with like an at my name or mods, because mods let me know. It did look like it just froze for a couple minutes. I do have a good internet connection. I am wired, so hopefully we don't experience any issues. All right, so where to start here? So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to open up Content Manager, and you're going to want to find the asset that you want to reskin. Okay, so in this case, for this example, I'm going to do my P&B caboose. Just because that's an asset that I have. I've got the blank for it, and I'm kind of like set up to just give you guys like a quick overview of it, okay? So whatever asset you want, find it in your Content Manager. You're gonna highlight it. So this is my asset here. This is the caboose. You guys know it. You've seen it before in my videos, so I shouldn't have to explain any of that. So you're gonna find the asset that you want. You're gonna go up to Developer, and you're gonna find, or is it Content? You're going to go to Content, and you're going to clone the asset that you want to reskin, okay? And what that's going to do is that's going to create a new asset, and it's going to give a new KUID to it. So that's the first thing you have to do. Then what you have to do is go find that asset in Content Manager. So I'm just going to go into today, because I just did that today, and it should just show up. So we've got new asset. So because even though I cloned it, it's not going to take any of the name information. It's not going to take any of that information yet and apply it, because it's open for edit, and it's just going to show it as a new asset. So what you want to do is you want to right click on that asset, the one that you just cloned, and you're going to go to Open and then Show in Explorer. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up your Windows Explorer, and it's going to show you all of the folders that are associated with this particular asset. Okay, so now that you've got that open, you're going to see some of these folders in here. And so contained in these folders are all of the things that actually make the asset what it is. The ones that we're going to be concerned about is the mesh art. Mesh body. And what you'll see in here is a bunch of TGA files, text documents. There's all kinds of stuff in here. This is where you're going to find the asset that you actually are going to be skinning. But actually, let me back up for 1 second. The very first thing you want to do once you open up this window is actually open up the config file. And that's going to bring up a notepad thing here, and it's going to show you all the whatever this data actually is. The thing you're going to want to change here is what's known as the username. This is actually the asset name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to dbev. So that way, this is what's going to show up in Content Manager for you. So that's going to show up as dbev CE11 caboose. You can change this to whatever you want. So that's what I'm going to call it. And I'm going to save it. Usually I don't modify any of the other information in here. So just don't mess with anything else in there. So I'm going to save that. So now when I actually commit this asset, it's going to show up right here. Instead of saying new asset, it's going to say dbev CE11 caboose. All right. So anyway, we're going to go into our folder here, and you're going to want to find what file you need to reskin. And sometimes it's going to be listed as primary, sometimes it's going to be listed as map, maybe map 1. It really depends on however it was made by whoever made the asset. So each one is going to be a little different. It's probably going to say primary 1, map 1A, something like that. You're going to want to open this up with Photoshop. And this is basically what you're going to see. So it's going to show up as one layer. You're not going to be able to modify any of this stuff that's on here. It's all compressed into one layer. It's been rasterized. There's nothing you could do about it. So the first thing that you would have to do with any asset that you want to reskin is you have to blank it. And when you blank it, blanking an asset is like an entirely different video, so I'm not going to really cover that here. But essentially what happens when you blank your asset, you're going to be erasing all of the data that's on here. Any logos, any writing that you don't want, anything like that. And usually you would do that, let's say you would probably use the clone tool to erase it. That's a locked layer, so let me... Why aren't we? I can't see what I'm doing. My microphone is literally in my face. It's just not doing anything. I don't know why it's making that noise to me. Anyway, so you're going to basically want to erase all this. Photoshop is frozen. That's what's happening. All right, so I might have to relaunch Photoshop, which stinks because I had all these demo things open here. Let me just try to minimize it and bring it back. Just making noise at me. All right, let me close Photoshop. Totally locked up on me, of course. Classic technical difficulties. Oh, I see what's going on here. All right, never mind. All right, so let me relaunch Photoshop here. Okay. So basically, what's going to happen is if you wanted to blank something, you need it to, in order to reskin it, you have to blank it. And blanking it takes your asset and makes it look like this. So you're removing any detail that's on there that you don't want. So any logos, usually you would leave the weathering. This would not be a good candidate to blank because it's too complicated. Removing all of this striping would be a major pain. So when you're trying to decide like what asset you want to reskin, it's best to find an engine or piece of rolling stock that has a very simple, very basic paint scheme on it, because you're going to have to remove all this stuff. So for example, like if I wanted to remove this think safety thing here, I would probably use the clone tool and just pick an area and just start erasing it. So this is, again, everybody is going to have a different process for how they blank things, which is why I don't really want to go over this too in depth, but essentially this is one of the first things that you have to figure out how to do, is blank your asset here. And again, like I said, this would be a very bad candidate to try to blank because you've got all of these patterns here, and there's just no way that you're gonna maintain the detail underneath this. And what I mean by detail is the door frame and the door handle, windows, things like that. You want to maintain all that stuff. But essentially what you're aiming to get is this right here. Can I move these around, please? Photoshop is just not happy today. So at the end of the day, you're going to want to end up with a blanked caboose, which is going to look like this, or a blanked engine. This is the same caboose. This was blanked. I blanked this before. And I think the original, let me look at it. Oh, because it quit, it totally turned off everything. The original was this one right here, was a Yeah, I think this was the original one. So essentially I went through and I erased all the things that I needed to erase, and I was left with this. And then what you have to do is you use, the way I do it at least, you're going to want to go into adjustments with your layer and desaturate it. You want to kill all the colors that are in there and then increase your brightness. Again, everybody has a different way of doing it. I'm just going to assume that you'll figure that out on your own, or I'll cover it in a future stream. But this is how you basically get your blank canvas to work with. This is the RS1 that I have on the dbev, and this is the original texture that was on it. So this one wasn't really too bad to blank, because when I went into it, there's some letters that went over these sections here, like the not the hinges, but the frame itself. Nothing really went over any of the rivets. So it was pretty simple. There's no striping on it. It's all one solid color. Very simple to blank. So what I ended up with that one is this as my blank surface here to work with. So once you get to that point, and let me take a look in the chat here if anybody had any questions. I'm sure I see Sean is in the chat, so if anybody has any questions, I think Sean would probably be able to answer them. All right, no questions that I see. Okay, so from there, so now we've got our blank asset. Our asset is blanked. We can go through and I'm going to close this one out because we're not using that anymore. That was just the example. So we've got it blanked. You're at the point of blanking it. So the first thing that you can start doing, or that you have to figure out, is how this thing is mapped out. Now, every asset is going to be mapped out completely differently. Some will be upside down. Some will be left and right, side by side. Everything is going to be mapped a little tiny bit different. So the hardest part about reskinning, in my opinion, is trying to figure out where everything goes and what it looks like. And as you can see by this RS1, it's mapped out really well, but it's also very complicated to figure out, what is this little piece right here, down here? Where does that go? What is this? What is this? So trying to figure out which piece goes where can get a little bit complicated. The only thing that I can really recommend to you to think about is that you have to think about these assets as a 3D object that has been unwrapped into a 2D version of itself. So picture like a cardboard box, okay, like a cardboard box that you would pack up when you're moving. It's a 3D object, but what you can do is you can take that cardboard box apart in such a way that it's still one piece and it lays flat on the ground. And that's kind of basically what this is. It's that 3D box that's just been kind of pulled apart, and there's different ways that you could pull that box apart and still have it be one solid piece, but it'll still just lay flat on the ground, totally flat. So that's what you have here. In this case, the left side and the right side of this caboose are not upside down. I think this one on the RS1, I usually am going by these vents. So you could tell that this is the front of the locomotive and this would be the front of the locomotive. You really have to like look at it in Trainz and start to figure it out. So that's the first thing to start thinking. If there's any time where I'm not sure like what a part is, I usually color code it and then open it up in Trainz, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But what I want to do is stick with this caboose because it's simple, and I think it's probably the best bet to just show you. So this is the full P&B caboose with all the layers. I usually try to stay organized. This one is not particularly organized, but it's not terrible either. So let me just try to turn all this on. I had it like set before. So you can see I turned one layer on that is not right. Okay, so fat stripes, you could see that I did two different types of stripes to see which one was going to fit. So you can see all the layers that I have here and how I built them up. So the first one that I put down was just this flat orange. And then I worked my way up, added in the logo, the think safety. I added in the weathering and all that kind of stuff. I did it all separately, a little bit at a time. And normally I try to label everything. In this case, I didn't label a lot of stuff that I probably could have. But this isn't such a complicated thing. This is a little bit more complicated, this engine. So I've got my weathering labeled here, and I've got oil drips. So this is different types of weathering, decals. Normally what I'll write on here, this is all other stuff here, will be like side steps or front steps, back steps, air hoses, you know, stuff like that. So I know exactly what it is that I need to edit. Like, especially if I need to go back and modify something. I'll turn all these back on. That way I know exactly what it is that I'm trying to manipulate. All right, so this here is the debev engine that I have been showcasing in many of my debev videos. Okay, so onto the reskinning thing. So let's what's the best way to do this here? Let me think. Let me turn off everything for now. So once you have your blank and you're ready to actually start skinning, the first thing you want to do is take your blank and you're going to put it on, it's always going to be your top layer. Well, honestly, I can't say always, because in this instance here, it's not on the top. I've got green doors and these plates that are above it. And that's because I don't want them to be affected by other stuff underneath. If I put them underneath, then they're going to be covered up. So they're above. But 90% of the time, you're going to want your actual blank to be on the top layer. Then what you're going to do is you're going to want to set it to overlay, which is right here in Photoshop. Set it to overlay, and then I lock it. And what overlay does is you have to picture this kind of like a mask. So imagine the white areas are transparent and the black areas are opaque. And the entire gradient in between represents that transition between totally opaque and totally translucent. So what'll happen, what that means is anything that's underneath here, let's say this orange, you'll get your black outlines, but the white disappears, and the white will not affect the color. So if I turn off this top layer here, you'll see that that orange color is not affected by the white. And that's because the white acts as a transparency. So the black is what's going to show through. So that's why sometimes you want to have a really contrasty blank. Sometimes you don't. It really depends. It's up to your taste. The more contrasty it is, the harsher some of these like subtle tones are going to become, like these little splotches in here and your striping and stuff like that. So it's kind of up to you once you blank it how contrasty you want it to be. So let's see. So again, so it's important that you have your blank as your top layer and you have it set to overlay. Everything else is going to happen underneath it. And normally what I do is I just start with whatever my base color is. So in the case of if we're going to do a debev, caboose, I'm going to start with a blue. Let me see here. I have to open it though. Okay, so what you're going to see here is the beginning of the GP9 that I was skinning. Now, this is a really, really complicated map. So this asset was created by Where's Prada, and he also was kind enough to send me his blank, or it wasn't even a blank. It was the actual PSD file for the PNB. Which I've been modifying. And if you look in the layers panel over here, you'll see just all kinds of stuff that I have turned off that he has on, just different layers of weathering, and some of this stuff is like in another language. I don't even know what it is. So I've been kind of like working around that. So I was going to reskin this during this tutorial, but honestly, it's so complicated for me to even wrap my head around that I don't really necessarily want to do that. So I'm going to do the caboose. But what I want to start with is that blue. So this background blue. So what I'm going to do is just grab the sample of it, which I have here. And I'm just going to copy that number, and then I'm going to just jump over to here. And unless this is rasterized, which it probably is, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm just going to do a new one. And I could just do a solid shape, and that didn't change the color at all, did it? Okay, there we go. So now if I wanted to use some of the same themes from the PNB, because I'm using my PNB PSD, I could go ahead and just do all that. But I'm not going to do that because I don't want to confuse anybody. So what I'm going to do, I might keep the work safely, and I might keep the stripes. But the rest, what I'm going to do is just delete it. Actually, first, before I start deleting stuff, I'm just going to do a save as. So this is just for my own, just for me. Let's see, rolling stock, Drybrook. Didn't I? I thought I made a folder for this. We'll just put it here. All right, so now I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of those other things so we can just avoid any confusion. So that's the first thing I want. So let's say we want to see what this looks like. Let's see what this looks like in Trainz, right? So what do we have to do? We got to go back to our file that we have open here, our folder. So remember, this is the folder that we opened up from Content Manager. We're going to copy this location because this is going to change every single time that we open up this asset. So I'm going to Control-C it, and I'm going to copy it. And then I'm just going to close the folder. And then I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go to Save As. And I'm going to put that up in, I'm going to paste that location up into here. And then what you're going to have to do is you're going to save that as a targa because that's what it is. And you're going to want to save it as the same name. You're going to save over top of what was there. And what's going to happen is that this is going to compress all of those layers just into the one. So that's why you want to make sure that you save your PSD file first, which will save all those layers separately before you save this. So we're going to save it as a targa. We're going to go yes. And then you're going to get this little window that pops up, at least in Photoshop. Do you want to save it as 24-bit, 32-bit, or 16-bit? You're going to want to save it as 24-bit. The only time that you want to save as 32-bit is if it's something that has an alpha channel, such as what would have an alpha channel that you would need to save as 32-bit? Something that has like Windows on it or some kind of a specular something. I don't know. I don't really know all the nuances of it, to be perfectly honest with you, but I know that 32 bits, you only use that when you have something that has alpha channels to it. So we don't have alpha channels on this one because this is just the main mesh file. So we're going to just save it as 16 or 32 rather, or 24, excuse me. So we save it and then we can minimize this. And now we're back in Content Manager. So now we've modified the config file. And we've made our first adjustment to the asset. So, you know what? I'm going to back up. I'm going to back up really quick. Pretend I didn't just close out that window. The quickest way that you can view what this looks like without having to load the game is there's a piece of software called Trainz. I think it's called Trainz Mesh Viewer, or we'll see the name of it in a second. Anyway, you can find this IM file here. It's usually just body A. These ones have to do with, I think, separate loads. So you could do, we'll try body and see what that looks like. So this should be the main file. This should load up Mesh Viewer. So now this is just like a super quick way to look at what this is going to look like. Now it's only looking at this main mesh asset. There's no lighting or anything like that, but at least you can see, okay, this is what this looks like. Now, let's say, for example, we had a question about where something was. Like, I don't know, let's go back to our file here. So let's say we're looking at this and we're like, okay, we know where this side panel is. And then we're looking at these steps and we're like, okay, well, there's a set of steps here and there's a set of steps here and there's a set of steps here. Which side is which? Where do these belong? What I usually do is I'll just grab the rectangle tool and grab like a hot pink color, something that's really going to stand out, and just draw a new color on there. Why did that not do that? There we go. So I'm just going to put just that bright color on there, and then what I can do is go back and copy this location again, just in case it changed. And then we're going to resave it again. And now what we can do is we can look at our body.im once again. And you'll see now that the pink area that I just laid down, you'll see where it shows up. So now we know we can look at this, and then we can switch back over here and be like, oh, okay, well, that pink area, that belongs there. And okay, now we know if we want to color the steps, kind of where the border is for that. And okay, maybe I went a little bit too far because there's pink up on the top up here. So if I wanted to just color the steps in this thing here, you know, I got to skinny this up a little tiny bit. So there's a lot of trial and error to try to figure out exactly where things are mapped. But that's the best way to do it, and that I would recommend is, you know, when you get into something that's more complicated, like this locomotive here, if you don't know where something is, you know, say, draw a little rectangle on there with like a bright green or a bright pink or something like that. And then look at it in Mesh Viewer and see, then you can see where that is. So let's commit this and let's take a look at it in Trainz. So we're going to close out of the Windows Explorer window here. And like I said, so we've got the new asset. Nothing has been committed into the game yet. So we modified the config file. We named it debevc11 caboose, and we modified the skin a little tiny bit, right? So let's go ahead and submit it. And this is going to commit those changes, and you'll see this change to the name that we changed it to. The benefit to using Trainz Mesh Viewer is that you don't have to commit the asset every time. So if you want to view the asset in game, you have to commit it. And every time you commit it, it changes the location in Windows Explorer, and it's just a real pain in the butt because you have to keep changing. It just keeps changing the location. The thing that I don't like about Trainz Mesh Viewer is that sometimes it looks totally different in Trainz Mesh Viewer than it does in the game itself. So I don't usually, I use it for reference when I'm just trying to do some like small changes and stuff. But when it comes down to like, you know, actually trying to get an idea of what the weathering looks like in the game, or, you know, what it actually is going to look like with the lighting that's in the game, I always commit it and just jump into the game. So we're going to take a look at it in on the dbev. So what I'm going to do is just go up to here, and I'm going to go to today, just because that's the quickest way to sort through it. And you'll see there it is, debevc11 caboose. And we can click it, and we will just find a nice spot to place it down. And there it is. So we'll see that basically all the changes that we made are there. So I should also mention that a lot of assets have two separate files that you can texture, and we'll take a look at that in a second. The second file usually is like the rooftop and maybe like some tanks underneath or some underbody carriage type stuff. So we'll take a look at those. This is, so the one that's on here right now is whatever was the default, whatever it was before, probably the PNB one. So anyway, so we've got it. We're good. We've started it, and we've got our reskin already in the game. So I'm just going to go ahead and exit Surveyor. I'm going to save this so that when I come back and I want to look at it in game, it's already here. So I'll go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to minimize it. Do you guys have any questions in the chat right now while I'm like before I get ahead and like lose people, or like, I mean, what are your thoughts in the chat? Am I skipping over anything or questions? All right, I'm just gonna peek at the chat. All right, so for people just joining, we've gone over so far how to open up an asset that you want to reskin. We are working off of my PNB caboose just because I had pretty much everything all set up for that, and we are gonna reskin it into a Dry Brook and a Soapus Valley caboose. So I showed you guys how to open up the asset, clone the asset, open it up, modify the main texture file here, and save it, and then take a look at it in game. So that's what we've gone over so far. So I'll show you. So now that we've committed it into the game, we have to, if we want to make more edits to it, we have to open it back up again. So we have to go back to open. We have to go back to show in Explorer, and then it's going to bring it up again. Oh, that's the actual route, so we're not going to do that. So we got to go to open, show and Explorer. And now we can go back into here. So again, like I said, you can open it up with Trainz Mesh Viewer and just look at it, but maybe I'll do a side-by-side just to show you how different it looks in Trainz Mesh Viewer versus in the game with the game lighting. So we can I close this? There's no, there's no X, there we go. So the other thing that I had just mentioned is that sometimes you end up with multiple files that you have to texture. So if you really look at this asset, what we're looking at, or at this texture, what we're really looking at is the left side and the right side of the caboose, and then the front and the rear of it. Nowhere on here do you see the actual, any undercarriage type stuff or the roof or anything like that. So where that is going to be located is going to be on another asset. So I think on here it's secondary. So let's just take a look at that. So this is the secondary one. So this looks like it's the rooftop. And this is one of those situations where it's like, what is this? Where are these parts on this thing? So this is one of those situations where I would come in with my pink box here, and let's say I was trying to figure out like where this was. You know, I would put that over there and open it up in Trainz Mesh Viewer and take a look. In fact, why don't we do that? So let's just hide that for a second. So let's just look at this and just, I mean, imagine to yourself, try to predict where this sort of stuff is. It kind of looks like this might be part of the rooftop, just judging by the crisscross pattern that's there. But it could be part of the underbody. It could be part of anything. So what we'll do is we'll just put this pink thing on here. Clearly this outline, hopefully it shows up well on the video here too. This is definitely the top frame of the caboose, the cupolas or whatever it's called. So we know where that is for the most part, but we don't know where this is. So let's just take a look in the mesh viewer. And what we're going to do, again, we have to come back to this location. We're going to Control-C to copy it. And then we're going to do a Save As here. Paste in that location. Change your save type to Targa. And it's already going to have the name because that's what you opened up. So you're going to go to Secondary, Save, yes, 24. And now we can take a look over here again. We can open up Body. And it should... There we go. So now we know what that hot pink area is. Maybe. I mean, we know where it is. I don't know what it's supposed to represent. Maybe some kind of ribbing, I'm guessing, on the top of the caboose here for the rooftop. So now we know what that is. So a pretty generic smattering of dirt and dust and stuff like that will do just fine. So we're just going to leave it as it is. What did I do that right? Okay. So I'm not even gonna mess with that. So let's go back to this. Turn this back on. All right. How we doing in the chat? How's everybody feeling about this? I see a question here. Can you show a shiny, glossy look? I don't think you can do that. You can't do that with this sort of technique. That usually takes place. If this was Trainz 2019, I think you would need Quixel to do that. And that would be like the PBR based texturing. And Quixel is a plugin for Photoshop, if I understand correctly. And that allows you to paint your rust and shiny spots and stuff like that. But a lot of that has to do with the mesh itself. So let's just scroll through here. Doesn't seem like anybody has any big questions. All right, so I guess let's continue on with this. I'm gonna, excuse me. I'm gonna put the striping on the end just because I like the striping. It might change. I'm not necessarily doing this caboose as like a permanent thing. I don't think, I mean, maybe I'll like it a lot, but for now, I'm just kind of doing it to show an example. I'm going to close this out. So I'm going to think about like how I want to, what do I want to put on this caboose? So I've got my, my stripes, which I like. How do we want the logo, or do we want this whole big, can I just delete that? No. I'm not an illustrator, remind myself. Do I want it to say Dry Broken Soap's Valley like this, or do I just want the, do I want just the logo? So let's just put the logo on it and just see what it looks like. If I can grab the piece that I want. No, I'm gonna have to just find it. And I have all these assets like saved in folders and stuff like that, like the logos and that sort of thing, but it's kind of easier for me to just grab it and copy and paste it. So let's just copy that. I'm just going to paste it in just so we can kind of see what it looks like. And this is where a lot of trial and error, at least for me, I mean, maybe it's not so much trial and error for people who are way more experienced than me with this sort of thing, but, you know, figuring out exactly where this is going to land, because it, you know, to your eye, looking at this flat object, this would be the cupola kind of sticking out here, but I'm sure that that's definitely the case, but maybe it sticks out a little bit more, a little bit differently. So it's hard to say exactly how it needs to line up. And if it's even centered either, because sometimes you think that it's centered on here and it's not. So let's just go ahead and duplicate that. And I'm going to lock this so I don't accidentally grab it. This is such a weird glitch in Photoshop right now where if I hold down Alt, it should allow me to just grab and duplicate the asset that I want, or that I had highlighted, but instead it's grabbing what's on top. Kind of a pain. So I'm just going to duplicate that, and then we'll just drag this down here. And again, what's for me kind of difficult is trying to align these things to be exactly the same place on the left side and the right side, in terms of it being the proper height, maybe the distance between the bottom here and up here. And I'm definitely guilty of eyeballing a lot of stuff, mostly because I don't know how to properly use these stupid rulers. So I use them to like line things up, but I don't know how to actually measure with them, unfortunately. All right, so we've got that there. Let's just, let's throw these things on here just for the sake of it. And so my weathering also, that's the very last thing you want to do. So I'll show you, for example, the debev. So this engine here is originally a Penn Central engine, and I totally like grimed it up. I put layers and layers of weathering on top of it, graffiti and all kinds of stuff like that. But what I did first is I made, here we go. What I did first was actually make a Penn Central skin. And then I basically duplicated that and turned it into this monstrosity. So it's essentially the same thing. I made a clean version, and then I dirtied it up to my liking. So then I kind of killed two birds with one stone, basically. But what I'm trying to say with that is don't just jump right into your weathering. That's definitely going to be the last thing that you're going to do. You want to make sure you get a nice clean skin put on there first with clean logos, and maybe a light smattering of weathering, like I think I did. So this is the only weathering that's on this asset right now, and I basically just added a little bit of a highlight around the edges, a little bit of rust spots and that sort of thing, but I did it very light, so I actually had like a base to work off of later on. So, and then you can take it to the next level and do something crazy like this, where I've on this one added just a multitude of layers of weathering here. Let me see if I can find them all. I'll just kind of click through them. Just different layers of oil and just in grime and drips and anything like that. Just graffiti. And each time I put a different layer of like grime or something on there, I'm usually messing with the opacity and the amount of fill as well, because sometimes if this was on 100%, it's just going to be, see, it's just way too strong. So you're going to want to tile it back a little tiny bit. Maybe some actually work better at full strength than others, but you'll notice that a lot of the opacity and the fill and stuff like that tend to be on the lower side, 50%, or maybe even less in some places. This is the fading that I did over top of the logo and the name. But I guess that's the weathering is way more advanced type stuff. So, but I guess I might as well just cover it there. The graffiti is actually a texture that I downloaded. It's a PNG. Let's see if I can find it. It's just a PNG file that I downloaded. It's a PNG file with a transparency. And you could just kind of like lay it on there. And then you can see how I adjusted. That's how it looks like raw. And then I adjusted the fill and the opacity so that it looked a little bit more weathered and wasn't so strong on there. The other thing is, as you can see, because we're underneath the blank layer here, you keep all of that texture that's there. So let me show you what happens if you put stuff. Let's say you put this graffiti above your blank, or you don't set your blank to overlay. This is what it's going to look like. So obviously you can still see through it a little tiny bit because it's changed the opacity, but if you don't have your opacity changed, it literally just looks like it's sitting on top. You lose all of that detail underneath, and that's going to look like crap in the game. So you want to make sure that any of your details or anything like that are always underneath your main blank layer, and your main blank layer is set to overlay. The other thing that I tend to do when it comes to weathering is, let me see if I can find it. Something like on the rust. Okay, so in this one, I have all of my weathering basically tucked into folders here because there's a lot of it. Let's look at this one. So this is a top layer rust layer. I have it set to soft light, and that kind of gives it a different sort of look. So each one of these gives a different look. Like darken actually looks kind of cool. It actually sort of almost does the opposite. So sometimes it's good to play with these different settings here to see how they work. Sometimes they look really good, and sometimes they just look like garbage. But you know, you got to mess around with a little tiny bit and decide what you like there. All right, anyway, back to this. Got off track there for a minute. Let me take a sip of water and peek at the chat. Are there any questions? So you guys are speaking some kind of foreign language over there in the chat. All right, this doesn't seem like there's any questions, so we're gonna keep going here. So I guess why don't we just take a look at how this looks. So once again, if we're happy with this and we want to see what it looks like, we're gonna save it. So once again, we're just gonna copy this location because anytime you commit it, this location is gonna change, and this folder that it's currently in is gonna disappear. So we'll do a save as once again. Bring it to here. We're going to save it as Targa. And let's do a quick side-by-side of what this is going to look like in the mesh viewer versus how it looks in-game. So we can kind of get like a good feel for how this looks in mesh viewer, right? I mean, it's good for checking like the location of things. Like, all right, that logo feels absolutely enormous, so I definitely don't want that logo to be too big. So let me close that. Let's scale these down, and I'm gonna just select them. I think I could do this. Oh, maybe not. Let's just delete this one. Let's scale this one down a bit. Oh, I wish they changed the keyboard shortcuts here in the latest Photoshop. It's kind of irritating. We'll just clone that. I mean, a lot of when the reskinning is just, like I keep saying, it's trial and error, trying to figure out where stuff is. The basics that you really need to understand is get your blank, make sure it's on the top layer, make sure that it's set to overlay, and do all your work underneath. That honestly was the thing that just had me the most confused when I first started doing, when I first tried to reskin like forever ago. I was like, how do you preserve all of the details in here? Like, nobody's going to sit there and redraw them. Like, in my head, I was like, are people actually redrawing all these details on here? Like, I had no idea how it worked. But once I learned that you take your blank and you set it as overlay and do all your work underneath, then I was like, oh man, all right, that's what I was missing. That was the key point that I was missing this whole time. And I think once you know that and you kind of get the fundamental there, you can reskin anything. Now, I don't know what the workflow necessarily would be in paint.net or GIMP or anything like that. I'm assuming it would be kind of similar, but honestly, I have no idea, so I can't really comment on that. All right, so that's feeling a little bit better. I almost don't think I want the logo, though, in my opinion. Maybe we can just try... and I have to think about because I'm designing this all from scratch. If you were doing this from a prototype, obviously you just look at the prototype photo and just kind of copy that. But coming out of my head, like I have to like design how this is gonna look. Excuse me. Terry Bolden says he sent a question earlier about how to make a short line locomotive with the GW paint scheme. I mean, it's the same thing. You're just gonna have to. You have to look at the photograph and figure out how you got to find the right model, open it up like we just did, and look at your photograph and just try to lay down each layer, one layer at a time, and figure out how it works, or how to like place the shapes down properly. Like I said, start with your base layer, like your base color. In this case, it's blue, and just kind of build up from there. Something that's really difficult in the case of like this locomotive is how things align. So if we're looking at this one, I guess this is a good chance to like talk about this right now. If we're looking at this locomotive, we're clearly looking at it from the right-hand side of the locomotive, right? But what we're seeing is that the cab is way lower than it should be, and that's just because of how this is mapped out. So you have to try to figure out, all right, so these lines here, how do I get this line to match up with this line, and this middle line to match up with this middle line, and this top line to match up with this top line? I had to eyeball it and just figure out, okay, well, I know I want this line to be at the window height. So I kind of started with these three and then built off of that. I looked at where it showed up in the game, and then I started drawing lines over here. I put the rest of this stuff down and just tried to line it up by going back and forth between... I was actually not going back and forth in game. I was going back and forth on the Trainz Mesh Viewer because it was just quicker. But where things got complicated now is, look at the rest of this. This is the back end of the train. This is the rear end of the locomotive, but it's all part of the same plane. So what I had to figure out is, where is the actual end of this? Where's the edge? So that was another thing, and I'm still not totally happy with it. Just figuring out with trial and error, okay, where's the edge of it? Is it here, or does it line up exactly? Or, you know, where is it? So I kind of figured out where that was. And then I had to figure out, all right, where's the center? So I had to figure out where the center was from that point, and then I could kind of build off of that. This was really complicated to do, and this is one reason why I haven't progressed with doing any of the skinning. And you could also see on this model that the left-hand side of the locomotive is actually upside down. So when you go to skin the opposite side, when I go to put this Dry Brook in Esopus Valley on this side, I have to flip it upside down and, you know, rotate it. And do the same thing all over again on the other side, but I have to do it upside down. And obviously this one doesn't have a back on this side because the entire back is represented over here. So it's really tricky to decide and figure out exactly where each part is mapped and how the thing is shaped. And each model is going to be a little tiny bit different, and you really have to figure out like what's where. And there's so many grab irons on this thing too. Like you'll see that there's a bunch of grab irons over here, but where are they? I don't know. I have to make these probably different colors so that I could figure out, okay, these are on the front hood or the back hood or the side, because there's probably another set of grab irons someplace else that represents something else, somewhere in this mix. You know, like I have no idea what all these piping pieces are for, what they go to. Do they need to be blue? Do they need to be white? Do they need to be black, brown? So it's really, this is an extremely complicated model. Map is what I'm trying to say. So it's very difficult to try to figure out where all these things are. And, but you can kind of see here, like what I was talking about earlier, like if you picture like a cardboard box that's three-dimensional, you can kind of see where, you know, this would be the top here, and then these edges would fold down, this edge would fold down, and then this part, this is the nose, this nose would kind of fold in. So just like a cardboard box that you had to build, it is the same way, but there are a lot of detached pieces that are all over the place that you have to kind of figure out where they all belong. And that's absolutely the hardest part. That is absolutely the hardest part, in my opinion. It's not, you know, figuring out the color or doing the weathering and you know, the actual painting. It's figuring out where the things are. And then especially when it comes to doing lines, this was my first time even trying to do some kind of a complicated line pattern, and I honestly, it's pretty annoying. It's really not easy. So pick your models wisely when you want to skin something or reskin something. All right, anyway, so let's go. All right, are we committed here? We got that. Let's take a look at how this compares to in-game. So we'll close this. And once again, since we made changes and we want to see those changes made, we're going to have to commit this. So we're going to right-click on that asset again, and we're going to click Submit Edits. And Tane is going to do its thing. It's probably going to get really annoyed and say that there's a problem, but then it'll eventually commit it. Oh yeah, we were gonna try instead of the logo, we were actually gonna put the whole name on it. We'll try that next, just to see what that looks like. So we can go back into the game, just go to Edit Session, and since I already placed that asset down in here, we don't have to replace it. It'll just be there. Can I show how to do graffiti on a freight car? It's just a it's a PNG file. It's literally just like a photograph. that has a transparency to it. I didn't draw it or anything like that. It's just a if you go to the website textures.com, you can find stuff like that there. Okay, so there it is. So let me try to get a good angle of this thing. Now let's look at it compared to, can I scale this down? Ooh. I just want to scale this window down a little tiny bit. So you can see the difference between, hopefully you could see the difference on YouTube here, but you can see how different it looks in the game versus in Mesh Viewer. So again, like I say, Mesh Viewer is like good for reference, for lining stuff up, but it's not going to give you a true representation of your colors or anything like that in the game. Like even if we go to the shadow side, I'm pretty confident that those blues are not going to be the same. Yeah, so even still, this in Trainz Mesh Viewer, this blue looks way different than it does over here. So again, that gives you an idea of, you know, how to test these things out. It's good to check both. Don't just rely on Mesh Viewer. In my opinion, maybe it's okay to do it. But you can also note when we're looking at Mesh Viewer versus how we look at it in the game, Mesh Viewer doesn't render certain things. For example, if we look at the game here, you can see the numbers on the top and the numbers on the side below the logo. Trainz Mesh Viewer does not show that. It's only going to show you the main mesh. Obviously, we don't see the trucks. We don't see the... yeah, I think that's the main parts of it. Yeah, there's no ARN numbers on the end. Trying to see what else. Oh, it looks like there's data here. I forgot what you call that. The running data. Even this CE11 and the little info there is not rendered in Mesh Viewer. So if you're working with something like, I could have accidentally put that logo too low and it would have been underneath the ARN number. So you kind of have to pay attention to that. You could look at it in Mesh Viewer and do a really great skin, and then you load it up in the game, and suddenly you've got ARN numbers, or, you know, these data panels or something like that, or like covering up some of the details that you put in there. So it's good to do both. I guess you got to check both. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's go back and just see what this looks like with the different logo idea. Okay, so once again, since we've committed it and we open it up in game, again, we have to go to open and show and explore to open it back up. And once again, we can navigate to here. And again, because we committed it and we made changes, this is going to be in a totally different folder again. So once we want to save it, we have to copy this again, this whole location, and then paste it. So let's do this one more time. And then I think start thinking about questions that you might have, because I've pretty much gone over the fundamentals of this, and I'm probably just going to wrap up this stream very soon. All right, so we got that. Let's Control C. You know what? We could even do this. Let's I'm getting we'll see how this goes. Let's just copy this whole thing, and I just want to see what it looks like just for the funsies. Definitely don't want these two things. I'm going to delete them. So let's put this on here. I don't think that this is going to work at all, but I just want to see what it's going to look like. We can scale this down. Don't hold shift. Now that's a new thing that they did in Photoshop that really annoys me. In order to like scale things proportionately like this, you used to have to hold down shift. And now it does it by default. If you hold down shift, then you get the warp whatever effect. But anyway, I want to see what this looks like. By the way, as fun as it is to design your own railroad and all that kind of stuff, it's a real pain to come up with your own paint scheme. It's honestly not my strong point, and I really don't like it. I'm going to delete that, and I just don't want to deal with these. No. Why did this warp? Was it really not the same thickness, or did I change that accidentally? I wonder. It's not scaling the same way. That's interesting. Anyway, let's just slap this on here and just take a look. I'm gonna just go ahead and delete that, and then maybe we'll just try to copy and paste this. I'm not a graphic designer, so like this is doing all this stuff is just kind of painful at times. And I don't rail fan enough to actually have an idea of why did I just do that? What a good true to life paint scheme would look like. What is going on here? Why are these all rotating differently? Let's see, how is this gonna scale? I'm just gonna back up a little tiny bit. We'll see what this looks like. Yeah, like I said, as much as reskinning and doing that sort of thing is pretty like pretty cool to be able to like build your own railroad and stuff like that, it's a tremendous pain. Unless you have a really good idea of what you want your paint scheme to be, you're a graphic designer, and you have a logo. Thankfully, you guys in the community are awesome enough to have helped me design the P&B stuff, and Sean Dean came up with this paint scheme, which I am very thankful for. All right, no idea how this is gonna look. Let's just duplicate it. Nope, that didn't work. Group those and then try to sometimes it's easier just to group everything. Sometimes oh, because I've got it on the auto select. That's why. Did I not duplicate the right one? All right, there we go. This is probably gonna look like garbage, but we're gonna take a look at it anyway. And it's definitely not centered either. So this is the other thing you gotta figure out is where's your center? Graphic design is one of those things that I can do, but it just takes me a stupid amount of time to actually do it. Doesn't come naturally to me. I'm just dragging these things right off the edge. So just try to center it on this side too. Again, just kind of, I'm just eyeballing it right now. I can make, if I want to keep this, I'll make better adjustments later on. All right, sure, whatever. Let's just see what this looks like. So again, we got to copy, oops. Copy this and then paste it back into here to save it. Always got to do a save as. Save it as a targa. Overwrite what's there, 24 bits. And let's just take a look at it in oops, in the mesh viewer. Yeah, so I mean that's just gives you an idea. We can look at it in the game too, so we'll close that out. And then I'm gonna take some questions and then wrap this up. So let's see, submit edits. All right, so then we can look at it here. Now, this is the problem that I would have with doing this sort of texture, is that it's covered up by this data panel here. And the problem with that is that I'm pretty sure this data panel is part of the mesh, so I can't do anything about it. It's just gonna be there. And I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe it does exist in the folder and there's a way to disable it. That's something that I'm not familiar with, because I'm not an asset creator, so I don't know. Truth be told, for the debev caboose, really what I think I want to do is do it in the Conrail scheme, and then cover it up with graffiti and stuff like that to make it look all beat up. Because they're not going to really use the caboose on this route necessarily. It's just going to be just kind of for show. But here you can see, this is what I was saying with that engine, is that, you know, is this even really lined up? I don't even know. Like, what's the angle to tell? Like, from here it looks lined up, but if you go a little bit above it, it's certainly not. So I don't really know how to tell exactly where, you know, if you're doing straight lines like that, I don't know how they're supposed to line up. This one I did a little bit different on the rear end, but I don't know. We'll see. I think the GP9 will probably be in this scheme, but I need to develop it a lot more, and I don't really know how I'm going to do it. But anyway, I think that I don't have the other debev. Oh, we can take a look really quick. I might as well show you the debev, the RS1. Oh, not that one. This one. So I guess we can just take a quick look at how this looks in the game, and then what it looks like. Let me flip this well, I think it's oriented properly. So just take a look at it in the game, and then you see it there, and then we can just look at the actual skin for it. So it looks like to me that we're looking at this side. So again, like I said, when you're skinning it, you can use something for reference, like this vent on the front, for example. There it is right there. And then you kind of know that the cab is going to be on the other side or somewhere in here. And then you just sort of figure things out from there. But like I said, the main thing to really understand is, you know, make sure you clone your asset that you want to reskin, rename it in the config file, and make a blank. If you're on my Discord and you're trying to make a blank, I'm sure somebody would be able to help you if you're kind of struggling with that. I will do for patrons, I will do a stream maybe next month for how to actually create a blank, and I'll just do one, I guess. I don't know. You guys, whoever's a patron, can tell me what you want to see for that. And then once you get it open in Photoshop and you've got your blank, just make sure that that you've got it on the top layer. Here's your blank. It's on your top layer level, and then you set it to overlay. And I always lock it too, so I don't accidentally, you know, start putting some paint on it, or, you know, doing something, remove it or anything like that. So, yeah, that's the main thing. I mean, when it comes down to like weathering and stuff too, truth be told, I don't usually do a whole lot of brushes. I guess I'll give you a tip right now. I don't want to like spoil all my techniques, but there are brushes that you can get. Let me just make a new thing here to just show you. There are custom like weathering type brushes that you can get. But I don't really use a whole lot of brushes. So here's one that I tend to use a lot. It looks like drips. So, you know, you can use that to add like oil slick looking things. Let me see if I can get the brush the right size. So you can find stuff like that. There's just different weird patterns. You can use these to varying degree, depending if you use them really big or really small. Like this sort of texture is really good for, I think I used it I did use it on here to cover up the name Pen Central. So there's different types of brushes that you could find that have different, they're good for different techniques. But I think that's about all I got for this stream. I'm gonna keep an eye on the chat for another couple minutes here and see if you guys have any questions or anything specific. I can kind of go back and recap things if you need me to show you something again or anything like that. Just mention it in the chat, and I'll hang out for the next couple minutes. And I guess while I'm waiting for the chat to populate, if I don't get anything in the next couple minutes, then I'll just end the stream. But it's tough, man. Reskinning is tough. I guess I'll show you another example. So I just did a for like buildings. So let's say you want to reskin. We can look at rolling stock too. Let's look at some quick rolling stock. Okay, so this is P&B, one of the P&B skins. So if you have the P&B asset pack, you'll know that there's three different types of, hoppers here. So I'll just show you each one quickly. This is probably not a good example because I got the PSD from JR, so there was a lot of like stuff, like a lot of these layers here were already in there, like rivets and all kinds of other stuff. They were like reskinned and different things. So this is probably not the best example to show you, but this is what like a hopper would look like. And I'll show you. I just did a building, so I've been doing buildings for the Drybrook. So we can look at this one. So, oh, you guys haven't seen it. Oh, it's in tomorrow's episode. All right, spoiler for tomorrow's episode. So I reskinned a depot into Drybrook. So this was the JR depot. I think we've all seen it a gajillion times. So this is just something that was the base texture. I threw some colors on it to change it. And this is another one of those that has two separate maps. So that's your main map here, and then in the other map you've got the roof and all of these little tiny pieces here, all down here, which are all pieces of like the molding and stuff like that, which luckily I just did all one color. But, you know, if you want to do a building, the techniques are all the same to do buildings. I don't know about like other assets, but everything is going to be mapped into like a little square like you see here. And you just have to figure out where it is and what you want to recolor. So I guess that's going to do it. You guys, it doesn't seem like there's too many questions in there. I hope you guys learned something tonight. And if there's anything else that I can answer, or if you guys have suggestions for other tutorials that you'd like to see, leave me a comment. Don't put it in the chat because the chat is just going to go away and I'm never going to see it again. Put it in the comments below, or send me an email, or just leave me a message on the Discord or something like that. And then I can, you know, try to cater these things a little bit more towards what people want. But I thought this was probably a good intro to kind of get started with this sort of thing. Let's see, can I make this an official video? I'll see if I can do an actual official video for reskinning, but I can't make any promises. I was trying to do a video like this the other day, and I was having problems actually recording the screen for some reason. It wasn't working properly, which had me really worried for live streaming tonight, but it seems to be working fine. But I guess that's going to do it for tonight, guys. Make sure you are subscribed and you hit the like button if you've enjoyed this. If you're interested in becoming a patron on Patreon, you can become a patron for as low as $1 a month. And you can check out the benefits there. There's a link in the description box below. But I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I guess I'll see you guys next time. Oh, Discord. Before I go, let me give you the Discord link. I have to open Discord. I always give the Discord link at the end. So if you made it to the end and you're not on the Discord, you get invited anyway. Invite people. All right, here you go. There's the Discord link. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you for hanging out, and hope you learned something. I'll see you dudes in the next stream.